Morning, Ben.
Morning. How's it going?
Good, mate. How are you?
Very good. Yeah, very good. Rested.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming down.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Well, listen, this was requested in two ways. You directly, but a few requests recently that I've had too many guests maybe who are politically on the right, libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, but not hearing too much from the left. And obviously when this show comes out, there will be some people triggered because I've had left-leaning people on the show before, and the YouTube comments, they go crazy because people are like, why are you giving these psychopaths?
Why are you giving them airtime?
Why are you giving them a platform? For context, I was definitely somebody who would lean on the left as a youngster. I would say Bitcoin pushed me more to the right, and now I'm just kind of like all over the place. I don't really care what the issue is. I'm happy to discuss various issues.
I think that's kind of the problem, is the fear that if you have a political viewpoint which is different to the prescribed one, which is currently part of the sort of cultural ideology of the outspoken Bitcoin, which people are exposed to, then there's the fear that there's going to be kickback from it. And I personally, I work on a bunch of projects, and I've had to kind of like distance my political thoughts away from my projects because I get muted and blocked on Twitter, and then it doesn't do, if I'm promoting something I've done in one of our free and open source projects which I'm working on, then it limits its reach if I'm being blocked and muted by people on Twitter. So it's what I will say though is, quite early on in Bitcoin, when it was magic internet money, when there was a very diverse range of political thoughts within Bitcoin, within the Bitcoin quote unquote community, and I'll trigger some people just calling it a community.
There is no community there.
There's only individuals in a community. Yeah, so at some point, maybe it was around sort of 2016, 17, because obviously, libertarians in the US, the Austrian economics, the ANCAPs, those sorts, there's immense value in Bitcoin, of course. You can't deny that. It makes markets more efficient. You're using the cryptographic laws of the universe to secure your private property. I mean, how can it not appeal to that type of person politically, or with that political leaning? But then to say that's where it ends, and its scope is only limited to those group of people, and other people with other political ideologies can't see value in Bitcoin, I think just limits its scope and reach. So, Bitcoin itself, it wouldn't exist without the free and open source software which it's built on, the copyleft free and open source software, which is itself a result of private capital failing to meet the needs of certain software requirements. And as well as that, you have, consensus, decentralized decision making. Something like consensus has been explored in left circles, socialist circles for hundreds of years, and how to do consensus well has been explored for a very long time. So, of course, people on the left can also see value in Bitcoin. I think the common enemy, which those on the left, those on the right, should probably are targeting by using something like Bitcoin is state power, state control, and that will trigger your audience, because I'll say, well, this guy's associating himself as a socialist, and now he's saying that Bitcoin is good, that Bitcoin attacks state control. If you look historically at socialism, the history of socialism, it wasn't until Lenin brought about the vanguard and thought that he could take the power of state to bring about a socialist society, that the statist socialist side, the side of socialism which is statist, became more prominent. Before that, it was always very anti-state. Look at Rosa Luxemburg; she was killed by state for being anti-socialist, anti-state socialist. And then, if we go back to the first international working men's club, which was where Marx and Bakunin fought it out. Marx was very much on the side of this idea of a worker revolution, where people working would seize control of production, and then you would bring about this socialist society. And Bakunin said, well, no, actually, he was also a socialist, but socialist anarchist, lefty. He said that if you did that, then you would bring about a red bureaucracy. And what was the phrase he used? That people would be beaten with the people's stick, which is essentially what happened in the USSR. He predicted it all very insightfully. But then to having these incredibly bad examples where people have tried to bring about a socialist society. Well, I mean, have they tried to bring about a socialist society, or have they just actually just empowered themselves? Having these incredibly bad examples and then saying that that is socialism, it's like looking at capitalism through state capitalism and saying, well, this fails because, interpreting the whole of capitalism as state capitalism. And the capitalists will say, well, that isn't capitalism. That's not a true form of capitalism. And they've got a good argument in saying that. And similarly, if you have something like state socialism, and someone like me would say, well, that isn't socialism. Look, you can't tarnish a cooperative with the same brush as, the thing which brought about things like gulags and and Mao in North Korea. They're not the same. Decentralizing, like something like production, for example, production of software, production of real life goods, that's not the same as, giving state power so they can beat people with the people stick.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack here. As I said, I've definitely, since I discovered Bitcoin, gone more to the right and more towards libertarian ideas, and I'm very interested in them. But I'm interested in listening to everyone. Even if you're a socialist, I want to hear from you. I want to hear your ideas, and I always wonder what in there is there any value we can take from it.
Libertarianism was always a leftist tradition. So it comes from libertaire, which was a French political pamphlet, which is libertarian socialism. That's where libertarian socialism started. And then over time, I think that was co-opted by was it Milton Friedman or Ayn Rand or someone like that, who then started using the term, as well as the term anarchist as well, to describe their right-leaning political ideologies. But, us on the left, we would say that although the intentions are there to empower the individual and the self, which is, very worthwhile intentions, it often ends up becoming a form of kind of neoliberalism where you're actually just empowering a new master, a corporate overlord, or you're empowering state, because we do have like state capitalism now where, it's being co-opted by big corporation and corporate interest. So I think the main thing is that people maybe on the right, they will say that the best form of production for general liberty for people has already been invented, already exists, and that's just capitalism, free market capitalism, laissez-faire capitalism, just let it do its thing, okay? Mm-hmm. And then people on the left would say, well, actually, I mean, without regulation, capitalism can kind of run amok. And is there anything we can do is there any other forms of production which would give people greater liberty, a general greater liberty? But then at this point, I think it's very important that I must note that there's a big difference in property and in different types of capital. So I'm talking about big corporate faceless capital, the sort of, which was brought about with the East India Company. And there's a great quote actually from the impeachment of the East India Company, which is a corporation has neither a soul to be condemned or a body to be punished. Therefore, it does as it likes. And that was during the impeachment of the East India Company back in 1790. So it's long been recognized that corporate capital is different to other forms of private capital. So when you look at The Wealth of Nations and Adam Smith, and he talks about this concept of the invisible hand. So the merchants of England, they would have some sort of vested interest in benefiting their community, and they wouldn't want to create horrible division of labor and turn man to beast, as Adam Smith said, because they would feel that some connection to England. But then with multinational corporations, that kind of invisible hand which guides private capital so it doesn't screw people over too much, then just gets eroded away. And I do think that corporations, when they get to a certain size, could be replaced by some sort of utility commons. And that's the sort of thing which I'm kind of interested in exploring. And then, I mean, that's kind of like a ideological, where could production go in the future kind of concept. But if you're just talking about Bitcoin, I would say that Bitcoin is a commons. It's a monetary commons, a value transfer commons. What is a commons? So a commons is a shared resource which people can use, and then it's within their interest to keep that resource going and then and nurture that resource and help it grow. And that's what Bitcoin is. And if any private interests try to co-opt Bitcoin, like Roger Ver did when with the Bitcoiners attack it because they realize that that's a centralizing point of failure, that we don't want a corporate interest to take control of Bitcoin, the network. We want it to be a commons. We want it to be publicly accessible, freedom of association. And then I'll go back to Marx and Marx's summarization of communism. Full communism was that each to their own need, each to their own ability. So the idea being that whatever you need, you can use a system. It's fine, it's free, and then you contribute where in which you can. And that's kind of like the utopian ideological where communism would end up in the future. But I think that just that phrase itself is very much like Bitcoin. It's each to your need. Use the system. It's fine. Use it. Make use of it. And then after a while, you kind of feel like you need to contribute back, and you have this urge to help kind of build and make the system better. And some people will say, well, that's just for individual interest, and that's fine if that's what you want to think. But I think there is also, we can't hide the fact that there is like an egalitarian aspect to it, where you actually want to help other people who want to access that system and use that system to give them more liberty and freedom.
You're giving me a lot to unpack here. There's a lot to get through. Okay, Ben. So when I first discovered Bitcoin, somebody introduced the Silk Road to me. And I was like, this is cool. This is money that I can use to buy drugs on the internet. Badass. And obviously I discovered censorship resistance, and that was cool. And it wasn't until years later where I started to dive into the more political side of it. But at the same time, people were saying to me, Bitcoin is apolitical. Doesn't matter who you are, Bitcoin is for anyone.
Fantastic.
But the voices of the political side of Bitcoin have been growing. And there is definitely a louder voice for libertarians. There's a louder voice on the right. The voice from the left seems to get shot down. And a lot of the conversations that I've had usually come privately because people don't want to be shouted at for
100%.
holding their certain views. So I think there's a lot to unpack here. And what I'm interested in doing is speaking to as many people as possible, because what I care about is how does society coordinate itself. I get called a statist cuck all the time. I'm a reluctant statist, but I do believe democracy is the best thing we have right now.
Absolutely. I agree with you completely. This attack on democracy, I think, where in history have you had like peaceful transitions of power where it ended up in war and suffering and society being pulled back decades or hundreds of years? And democracy is the best thing we have, and currently representative democracy is the best thing we have. Again, it's a bit like an attack on me, the left attacking capitalism by looking at state capitalism, or the right attacking socialism by looking at state socialism. It's you're looking at representative democracy and you're saying, well, all democracy is a failure and it's terrible and it's not fit for purpose. And it's like, well, hold on here. A democracy is an umbrella term. There's lots of different types of democracy. There's direct democracies, e-democracies. There's a whole different range of democracies. Go and look at the democracy Wikipedia and then pick a democracy which you think is better. Yes, the way in which we vote for things could be better. We have all this incredible technology now which allows us to access the internet through a device in our pockets, which we have on us at all times. Like, we have better tooling now for creating better forms of democracy. It's just a case of all those legacy institutions having to catch up with the technology, which has just grown so fast and so exponentially. But tooling is one of the most interesting parts of all of this technological, advancement. Is you look at democracy itself. So that was brought about and made possible by the printing press. Because people could then have access to information. They could read political pamphlets, and the more people had access to education and reading. But before the right tooling, something like democracy, it would flare up every now and then. You had in the ancient Greece, you had democracy. You had these little pockets in history where democracy would flare up. But then if anyone looked at it, it'd be like, well, that practically isn't going to work. Something like feudalism is much better. It makes much more sense. Or slavery makes much more sense for society to be able to produce things. And then we had democracy. We had the tooling in order to make democracy possible. And I'm saying that when you have this technological revolution, you have people accessing the internet and accessing all these suites of tools, then different forms of prediction do become possible, and different forms of democracy do become possible, and society will get better. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, get rid of democracy altogether, and then return to a king and a queen because democracy failed. And it's like, no, wait there. We can just improve the buggy system which exists right now.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things about this is like, rather than wanting the big red button to destroy democracy and we all become sovereign, independent individuals with private, arrangements and insurances to back, everything up, which I think on paper sells very well. I think on paper, I think the libertarians define the way society should operate in probably one of the best ways possible. I just don't have the belief it would be that way. What I like about democracy is that there is this always push and pull from the left and the right. You know, here in the UK at the moment, we have a conservative government, and let's be quite frank, they've done a terrible fucking job. They've done a terrible job, and now we're seeing this push to the left. You know, that push and pull to the left, I think, creates some balance. What I wish the libertarians would engage more in politics to have that push and pull from the sides of the state. So we have the push and pull from the left and the right, which is super helpful, but the state always grows. It's always increasing in size. And it was one of the things that Eric Voorhees said to me a long time ago, really stuck with me. He said, I don't want to get rid of the state like now. That's not, I mean, he does, but he said, I'd like to start simpler. Let's just say, let's make government smaller. Let's start with 5%, even 1%. Let's just make the state smaller. And I would like that idea of some form of representative democracy, which allows the libertarians to have an influence to make the state smaller. Now, some libertarians do engage in politics and some don't. And that's a conflict with libertarians. I understand that. But I do like that idea. I do like the push and the pull. I accept every criticism of democracy that's pretty much out there. It is shit.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But I think a society without it could be much worse. Yeah. I mean, look at the places in the world where you don't have functioning democracies. You know, they're usually places which have worse access to healthcare. You know, they usually have more deprivation. They usually have lower standards of education. Not everywhere. I know some people say, well, point to some authoritarian places. But generally speaking, and I do like some of the parts of the democracy we have, the democratic process we have in the UK, but I also like some of the way that I like the structure of the US system, the state-based system. I think there's lots of bits and pieces we like.
I think checks and balances on power are always good. Like in any healthy democratic system,
that's what Bitcoin does.
They've realized that they need lots of checks on power. And it could be anything. I mean, we have the Queen, but it could just be, some bloke down the street. Like it could be a check on power. Like checks and balances on power are very healthy and very good. But no, I agree completely that it's not. Obviously, it's not perfect, and it's very much broken, and it often empowers the wrong people and can be easily co-opted. But I mean, like you say, to reduce state, I think the best way to reduce state is Bitcoin.
Yeah,
you take the power of money production away from state, and then suddenly their power, you chopped off their arms. Their power is very limited. What they can actually do.
And Ben, do you know what, the timing is right for this? Because if you look back at the history of government state budgeting and running a surplus and a deficit, we have these cyclical economic times. Sometimes it's a surplus, sometimes it's a budget. For some reason, whatever it is, maybe it's due to globalization, maybe it's due to technology, but we've now at a stage where governments don't run a surplus and the deficit just gets bigger and the money printers got out of hand. And it's at that point where in the US, when they formed the United States, they realized we had to separate church and state. We're now at that point separating money and state because the money printer goes brr. Whatever happens, it goes brr. And we're seeing the impact that's having on people. If we have Bitcoin as a check and balance, that to me is a way of improving democracy rather than destroying it.
See, I think it'd be more complicated than that.
Okay.
I can't imagine a Bitcoin-based world. Maybe eventually we'll get to a Bitcoin-based world. But I think in the meantime, look in El Salvador, for example.
Sorry, bear with me. I'm not saying I want Bitcoin to replace fiat currency now. I see it as we have both. Fiat currency is our day-to-day, it's our spend, it's our liquid cash.
But now then here becomes...
But Bitcoin is my
your easy on-ramp savings technology. Now, but here's the question, right? Rather than just focus on the Bitcoin stuff, can we in fact make fiat better? Could fiat be, something which is like a side chain off Bitcoin, pegged to Bitcoin, and is federated, so it isn't within the control of just a small handful of people in the Bank of England? Like, could we make fiat better? I think we probably could, and I think again it would make society better and would limit government's power. So if you think in El Salvador, for example, they're trying to use Bitcoin, and it's great for paying for your coffee in McDonald's. It's fast. The digital payments technology is amazing. Some fruit seller can sell some fruit on the street. They can have access to a digital currency, which then they go spend in a big corporation, which they were never able to do. They didn't have a bank account. A huge percentage of El Salvadorians don't have bank accounts, so they didn't have access to digital payments. Now they have access to digital payments. However, if you're on a surplus income, and then Elon Musk tweets some crap out, and then Bitcoin halves in price, and then you've gone from $200, in your monthly budget to $100. Like, that's a huge problem. That's a bug in the system. But I do think that, so if you look at Liquid, I know that we were talking before off air.
You can say.
Okay, I can say. You were talking about the idea of tokenizing your football club. So
hold on, let me put some context because people
not not in the shitcoin Ethereum.
Yeah, let me put the context just so people don't think, oh god, he's going to do a shitcoin. One of the
liquid asset.
Yeah, so one of the things I was explaining to Ben before we started is that I would like to give fan ownership, the opportunity for fans to own part of the football club. And globally, there are people around the world who own Bitcoin who might want to own part of the football club. One of the ideas is that you could tokenize the equity, but you tokenize it so it's on Liquid, you tokenize it so it's actual security. So rather than some shitcoin that has no claim to anything, this is actually a claim to part ownership of the equity of the club that would be issued on Liquid, traded on something like the Bitfinex exchange. And I haven't made the decision because I even think some of those people have got questions. I only want to do it if it's a way of making you have a claim to ownership of the equity of the club, therefore a claim to ownership of the upside. So,
and from speaking to you as well, it very much seems like you're in the R&D phase where you're trying to find the best, these sort of the best solution for that. And for the fans of the football club, it'd be absolutely amazing for them as a birthday, Christmas gift or whatever to be able to buy this thing, which then actually gives them, it's like a share in the club. It's a really interesting concept and a great use case for Liquid. But going back to Liquid, it's possible. The technology exists that El Salvador could have some sort of stable coin, the El Salvadorian dollar pegged to some fiat currencies or some asset basket, whatever. It could have a stable coin, but it could utilize, if it's built on something like Liquid, it could utilize the Lightning Network. So for the El Salvadorians, in their wallet, they just have Bitcoin and then they have El Salvadorian dollar. The El Salvadorian dollar exists on top of Bitcoin. It's completely stable or pegged to something which is relatively stable. But they will use it in the exact same way. They'll scan a Lightning invoice and they'll pay a Lightning invoice and it'll be used in the same way. And the technology exists to build that right now. Like some very capable people in somewhere like Blockstream could make that. And I do hope that the El Salvadorian government is in talks about making stuff because it's desperately what they need. Like the Bitcoin experiment is great, but the price fluctuation sucks and it makes it unusable as actual money. And I do think that this will be, if you think about the Central Bank of China, if you think about the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, by the way, not Bank of Britain, which it should be, Bank of England, and then if you think about the Fed as well, they're all exploring digitally native currencies because they understand the value of digitally native currencies and sending microtransactions through a network. All these countries which don't have central banks, are they not going to look at the tool set which exists to build these things in a decentralized way? I think they are. Like, what are they going to do? Are they going to build a central bank and then that central bank is going to try and build a digitally native currency in a centralized way? No. Like, they're going to make use of these decentralized technologies. And as Bitcoiners and maximalist Bitcoiners who want this idea of like a whole Bitcoin standard where the world runs on Bitcoin, I think we can get there. But I think the way in which we get there is by improving these fiat currencies, using these decentralized technologies, but basing them on top of Bitcoin. And then maybe having some fancy schmancy Bitcoin vault or something with arbitrage to be able to keep the pet. I don't know. There's also interesting technologies you can do in order to roll these things out. If you look in the UK, we had the Bristol pound. That was incredibly popular. And part of the reason it's incredibly popular is because people like a local currency. They feel like they just feel kind of some association with it because they're from Bristol. Like for example, if Wales were to create a Welsh pound, and there are some people within the Escumri sort of Welsh nationalist movement who want to build something like this, like a stable currency, which is so censorship resistant that the Bank of England or Britain couldn't stamp down on it. People could still use it in a censorship resistant way, but it would be stable and it would be federated, and the control would rest in the hands of the Welsh people, or the control would rest in the hands of the El Salvadorian people. I think that's the direction in which it'll probably go in.
Does Wales have its own banknotes like Scotland and Northern Ireland?
No, it doesn't.
It's a bit unfair.
It is a bit unfair, isn't it? Yeah, I'll bring it up in our next meeting.
Although it's fucking annoying when you get like a Scottish £20 note.
And then no one will accept it.
No one will accept it.
You get to do your little, this is legal tender rant, don't you?
It's legal tender because it's worth £19.
It's one of my favourite generic rants you can have at people.
Well, it's like my kids always get, my mum, bless her, she actually, it's 5 years yesterday and she died. Big shout out to my mum because she's the person who got me she's the reason I do this.
Oh yeah, I heard that story. So you were trying to get medical treatment for her.
Yeah, it's getting cannabis oil because she was dying from cancer and we wanted to get her to treat it. We got it too late, but that was... God,
that's incredible, isn't it? Cannabis oil, something which is so abundant and
Yeah.
should be easy to access.
Fucking banned. So yeah, so my dad was like, "Oh, Pete, how are we going to do this?" I was like, "Oh, you remember they used to buy cocaine on the internet?" I had that probably. He's like, "Yeah." So it was the same thing. So we bought the Bitcoin, and then sadly, Mum passed. But yeah, it's 5 years ago yesterday. So amazing. It's gone so quick. But thanks, Mum. But she used to give my kids their Christmas presents or their birthday presents, and it was always like Northern Irish £20 notes, and then the kids were like,
cool.
"Dad, I don't want this. Can you give me like?" So I'd have to swap them, and then I'd go, and people wouldn't accept it, or they'd give it that weird fucking look.
I used to love getting the Scottish bank notes, because you get the £1 notes, so you can feel like a gazillionaire.
How old are you?
Big wedge of money. I'm nearing 40.
Right, so I'm 43. So you remember the pound note?
Yeah, in Scotland. Yeah. And they've got rid of that.
Yeah, there's no pound note anymore.
Oh man, that was so much fun.
We haven't had pound notes for years. I don't know if they might still have it in Scotland because it's. But we don't have it here. But
no, in Scotland.
Do you have you old enough to remember the halfpenny?
Maybe. I'm old enough to remember finding them in the house, under sofas and things, and being like, "What is this?"
So when I was about 5, we used to go swimming at the local pool, and you know the penny sweets. Yeah. They used to have the ones that were halfpenny. So we used to have that halfpenny coin. I mean, at that stage now, there's certain places. I think it's in Canada. They've got rid of everything under. I think it's Canada. Everything under 5 cents, and they just kind of round it.
Yeah.
Because it costs more than a penny to make a penny. Or something.
Well, this is another interesting topic we should probably go into. Is just that physical currency is being used less and less, but then there are still services which are reliant upon physical currency, such as the sweet machine and the arcade machine. And
you're replacing those with cards.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you can't.
Do you know what I think?
Can I go and buy some sweets in a sweet machine with a card? Can I go buy, some? I mean, you can, but then you have to have this thing which is online all the time and is always being connected to the internet.
Do you know what I think one of the biggest losses will be for removing physical currency is buskers and beggars.
Beggars and buskers.
Yeah.
I know, I feel terrible. And every time you walk past, you're like, have you got a card machine? Like, do you accept
I always carry cash.
I need to start doing that, I need to start doing that.
I just keep a small amount, a bit like, Bitcoin cold storage. You have a small amount of Lightning on your phone. Yeah. I always have, about £100 in the house, and so I've always got cash just for the times when you want cash, you want to give someone cash, and plus you don't want to be tracked on everything.
No, but I think again this is why all these big central banks are exploring digitally native currencies. Is they understand that you need cash-like functions for a digital currency, and we can't be using this legacy Visa network system. It's just unfit for purpose in the modern age. So yeah, I mean, when it happens, I'll probably use the digital pound. But I do hope, and I think it's a good way as well for countries, which are under something like USD hegemony, where you're empowering. I mean, actually, Bekele had a really good point on this about the dollar in particular, which was if they do, some sort of fiscal stimulus where they create some quantitative easing and then they create some, bolster industry or something within the US, they have the benefits of that. They have the new motorway, they have the new dam, whatever. But then all these countries which are reliant upon their currency, they don't see any of those benefits.
It was Jack Mallers who said to me when we were in El Salvador, he said, when they're issuing stimulus checks, none of those are reaching El Salvador.
Exactly, none of them are reaching El Salvador. And it's a really kind of interesting point. So it's well within the interest. They incentivize these countries, particularly which using other countries' currencies. They're incentivized to wiggle out of it and build their own currencies. And if it's easy enough to do, I think it will happen, and that will be the next sort of step in Bitcoin domination.
Well, listen, I can't let you off the hook that quickly on the political stuff because I still got a bit more.
Yeah, that was an interest. But let's go back to the political stuff. So you said something about you don't want a overnight revolution. I agree with you completely. I think it's terrible, overnight revolution. And there was a problem with, particularly on the left side, where they had this historical materialism. So they looked at how in which the society changes, and they would look at something like the French Revolution. It was bloody and it was, sudden, and then you had this society changed, or it didn't change very long. You had some other, Napoleon take control or whatever. But anyway, you have society change in these big bloodbaths, and there was always this assumption that that's how society would go from like a capitalist for-profit production system to something like a full socialist system. Is it would be something which was bloody, and then it's like, well, let's bring about that bloody event. Let's create that overnight revolution. And Gramsci, who was the leader of the Italian Communist Party, he believed in something called a slow revolution. He had this thing called what's it called? Cultural hegemony, which is basically kind of common sense. Like, what's the common sense of the age? Okay, and then you've always got to kind of challenge the common sense of the age. So when slavery existed, it's like, well, it's okay to do slavery because they're not real people. They're like worth half a person or something. And that was the common sense of the age. Or when child labor existed, well, it's fine for that 5-year-old to climb up that chimney because they need to be able to provide for their family or something. And that's kind of the common sense of the. And now we look back at those things and we think that's horrible, and we understand that they're bad things. And then similarly, when you look at working environments, like worker rights and whether people are exploited in workplace or not. Obviously, some people have incredibly fulfilling jobs, but a lot of people are exploited in the workplace.
We can talk about that because I was listening to a podcast about Amazon on the way here, which really struck a chord with me in how Amazon operates its business.
Were all the employees really happy? And
they pretend that, but they have phones on them that track them. If they don't pick something up at a certain speed, a certain time, they can be they can be fired. That the delivery drivers are on such tight time scales that they're basically pissing in bottles to get to the next thing.
This is what Adam Smith talked about in Wealth of Nations, the division of labor. So if you make the workplace efficient, this is the overarching problem with for-profit private capital, is that eventually, when your capital could only grow so far, you need to start putting downward pressure on workers. So you need to reduce their wages. You need to increase their efficiency and how much they can produce in the period in which they're employed for, and in order to increase your profits. And that's a lot easier to. It's hard to do. So as going back to before about different forms of capital, and if you've got the big corporation, it's easy to do incorporation because you're disconnected from everything, can't you? In a small to medium-sized enterprise, which I love, by the way, I love the local coffee shop and the entrepreneur who has a bunch of businesses in his local community, and he has a connection with the people, the employees who work there. He understands that one of them may have a kid going off to university and slip them some more hours or increase their wage a little. So there's this kind of a human bond and human connection within that working environment and that form of private capital, which is great. All too often that gets stamped out by more efficient private capital, and this is the problem with monopoly and division of labor. But that's that then becomes. I was listening to your Austin Hill podcast.
How fucking good's Austin Hill?
He's great, isn't he?
Isn't he amazing?
He's great, but he was talking about the singularity, and he's talking about, and this is another contradiction: is you have all this downward pressure on workers and wages as well. So then eventually, people are going to struggle to buy the things in which you're producing. So he talked about that singularity, which I think he said was like 2040 or something is going to happen.
Is the singularity where Amazon runs everything?
Well, no, it can't. Because there's no for-profit. Because if you're not employing anyone, the robots literally do everything. Mm-hmm. So the robots are the teachers, the doctors, the Amazon driver, the farmer. All human beings, human labor can be replaced by much more efficient robots. And this is what I quite like about Bitcoin. Is actually Bitcoiners are they're quite good at being futurists, and they understand that how technology will advance, and they appreciate something like robots. Doing pretty much everything which humans can do better will probably happen, and it will probably happen quite soon. This Austin Hill, you mentioned this in your podcast, and then it's a case of, well, then how are the robots incentivized, like to make the things, to pick the food, why are they going to exist? Like, who's going to own them? Like, because Amazon can't exist. There's no there's no for-profit functions there. Are they going to be controlled by state? I mean, I don't think that's going to happen. I think the best scenario in that, because I was thinking about this, listening to your Austin Hill thing, the best scenario in that circumstance would be that they're owned as commons, as productive commons. And then, because this is a moment where humans have ultimate abundance.
Explain
of
productive
production.
commons.
So, when you first had like property rights in something like the Magna Carta, there was also the Charter of the Forest, which was drawn up, which was that the people of England could access the forest and they could forage. And they were very good, actually, with those rights at maintaining that commons, because it was within their interest. If someone went in and started chopping down loads of trees and then destroying the natural harvest which exists within the forest, then the rest of the community would kind of attack them for it, because that would mean that they couldn't draw as much from foraging from the forest. And that's a commons, okay? And my argument would be that Bitcoin is in fact a commons. If you start attacking it, then people are going to the users are going to attack you for attacking it.
That's fair.
interestingly enough, actually, the Charter of the Forest, that was encapsulated in the Robin Hood mythology, by the way. Steal from the rich to give to the poor and all that sort of stuff. So where was I going? Oh yeah, Charter of the Forest, Commons.
That.
What were we talking about with the Commons? Oh right, okay, yeah. So that's the idea, isn't it? So I actually think that obviously a lot of Bitcoiners refuse to admit that there is any sort of climate problem, and that human access to that they think that there's an unlimited amount of resources on the planet, and we can't damage the planet by producing too much stuff. I'm kind of on the other side of the argument. I think that
I'm with you on that.
We can damage the planet, and we are screwing the planet. It's quite scary.
Yeah.
And we need to have a better ecological relationship with the planet. And I actually think that the robots being able to do everything and being able to harvest, for example, will be a good thing. So if you look at farming, for example, now it's two-dimensional. You have a field, you've got to get a plow, and you plow through it, and you get all the corn or the straw, the wheat, whatever, from the field. But the actual most efficient yield-wise when it comes to farming is something like permaculture, where you have like a forest, and you have like things growing on the floor, you have things growing in the tree, in the bush. And you have like three-dimensional farming, and you have much greater yield per square meter. The only problem is with that type of farming is it's incredibly hard to harvest. Whereas if you have like these little bots which can fly around harvesting, like it makes sense to reforest the planet. So I do think that when you get to that point, instead of having like two-dimensional farming, suddenly all these fields will be filled with forests, and we'll reforest the planet. And the trees are the best technology to be able to lock up carbon, which there's too much of in the atmosphere right now.
We're going on tangents here. I don't mind discussing climate. I want to get back to the Amazon and companies as a comments.
This was kind of my point.
Because I think I'm going to disagree with you here.
This was kind of my point. Was, I mean, who owns the robots? Like who? And it's kind of a scary thought to think of.
Amazon owns the robots.
How are they going to own the robots? Because there's no one to sell anything to, because nobody works anywhere. Because no one works.
Oh, so you're going so far down the line.
I mean, is that far down the line? Or do you think humans will get to a point where everything we can do can be replaced by technology?
Yes and no. I don't think so. And probably not in my lifetime, but I certainly see the trajectory.
That's what the singularity is.
And I see the trajectory. I see the trajectory of maybe lorry drivers being replaced by autonomous lorries. But for a period of time, you're going to have a driver in the autonomous lorry checking that it doesn't go and crash into a bunch of school children. And we're going to have incidents where shit like that happens and people question it. So the trajectory is there, but I'm interested in where we are right now, because my issue with Amazon, which, I've got so many things I want to talk about with Amazon, but my issue with Amazon is that they're treating employees like shit. Their only goal is to make money, and they're destroying businesses. I mean, our high street in Bedford's dead. Our Waterstones doesn't exist anymore. And I used to like taking my kids there, and we would browse the books and buy a couple of books. That experience.
But we
is dead.
destroyed it though, didn't we, as consumers?
We have, and I'm part of the.
I buy things from Amazon. You buy things. Everyone buys things from Amazon.
I'm part of the problem. Yeah, but do you know what I do want someone to do? I want someone to fork Amazon and create not Amazon.com. Give every company the access to the platform to list their products, but you can order from them and you can compare the price and say, if you buy from Amazon, it's X. Okay, I'm going to pay £2 more from this, but the delivery driver is not going to have to piss in a bottle.
This is a very interesting. I got an interesting thought experiment for you. So you have Amazon, which exists right now.
Yeah.
And then we create using all this crazy decentralized technology. Okay. We realize that Jeff Bezos is a bug leeching.
He's a cunt. Let's be honest.
He's leeching a hell of a lot of value out of that system. So I mean, you can't say that a more efficient system can't exist. You get rid of Jeff Bezos and then reinvest that money back into Amazon. There we are. It's a better system. So you have Amazon. And you have decentralized Amazon.com.
Not Amazon.com.
Yeah, or not Amazon.com. Right. The products, I mean, I'm going to go a step further. I'm going to say the products on both of these pages, or both these websites, right, they're exactly the same. They cost exactly the same.
Same suppliers?
No, it doesn't even matter, right? They're exactly the same product. You go on both, and this is a hypothetical thought experiment, okay? And it's for the listeners as well, and they have to be honest with themselves, okay? Now, you have a choice. Are you going to go to the Amazon where people have the beep thing? And this is utopian, hypothetical, could probably never exist. Or do you go to the decentralized Amazon where the producers get more or less like 99.9% of the value? And then, 0.01% goes towards bounties for the decentralized Amazon software or something. So instead of the people working in the regular normal Amazon getting, 70% of the value of their labor and 30% going to Jeff Bezos. The people working with the cooperative, decentralized, not Amazon, whatever it is, or maybe it's just like a direct marketplace, kind of like an eBay type thing, but it's really good, right? If you've got the exact same products, they cost the exact same amount. As a human being, which one are you going to go to?
Well, it's kind of obvious.
It's an obvious answer.
But you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that. The efficiency will come from the centralized Amazon. You always will get a better service in terms of packing, picking, delivery from that. But the decentralized one, I think the way the decentralized one wins is that more's going to the producer. The people delivering it aren't pissing in bottles. People aren't getting sacked by a beeper. And by the way, if people want to listen to this one that I listened to, it was Rogan interviewing I can't remember the names, the two people who left The Hill, Saget and anyway, they've set their own podcast up. Like this is what they're talking about. I was listening to that on the way up. But yeah, but it's not even that, Ben. Right now, I want someone to make not Amazon, which is just the listing. Do you know what I'm going to do? Do you know what I'm going to do? From this show, I'm going to, little experiment. What's the date? I
didn't want to talk about the technology stuff, but I could talk to you about Diagon Alley, which is basically what you're saying.
What's the date today? What's the date?
It's the 13th.
Right. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to go for a month without Amazon, and I'm going to document my experience and just see what it's like, because I've probably got an average package a day, probably coming because of equipment. I'm going to do a month without it and go through the experience, see what it's like, and just because I want to get away from Amazon. Do you think, so you say that it's never going to happen, that a hierarchical, feudalist corporate structure is far more efficient than something of a decentralized nature when it comes to producing things. Again, it depends on tooling, in my opinion, but do you think that it's worth exploring building something like a decentralized Amazon? Yes, absolutely.
Even if you know that it's probably not going to work.
Yeah, but
because this is so. If you say going back to if for any of the listeners who are still hanging on, for going back to that concept of something like socialism being a collection of different the anti-state socialists, the state socialists, the libertarian socialists, etc. Okay, so socialism itself. If you just define socialism, what it is, okay, so it's the means advocating that the means of production, distribution, and exchange be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. Mm-hmm. Just advocating. So it's literally just saying, I think that the decentralized Amazon is better, and I would like to try and build that thing, right? Because I think it'd be better for human beings.
I agree.
Because they have some, ownership of the company. They have more value to take home because they don't have the exploitative downward pressure on wages, right? Even though that may be a complete impossibility. I mean, people said the same things about getting rid of slavery, by the way, just to put into context. Going back to the idea of Gramsci and the cultural hegemony of the time and the common sense of the time, slavery was the most efficient way to produce things, okay? Now we understand it's not. It's more efficient if you have workers, you have employed, and they have families and they have homes and they can have private property.
That's why Amazon needs unions.
Maybe, the unions, they can only go so far, and they often get corrupt. I'm a big union person. I'm still a member of my teaching union from when I was a teacher, and I'm not a teacher anymore. So, I very much like unions. I think there needs to be upward pressure on that downward pressure, which comes down. And one of those mechanisms, one of the best mechanisms for that is things like unions currently. But I do think that in a free market, if you have a completely free market, what's to stop? Again, like a laissez-faire free market capitalist, they have to accept this as part of the doctrine that a cooperative could join that free market and could, potentially, theoretically, hypothetically, in a utopian world, outcompete the private capital. And then if it does, is that worth advocating? Is that worth exploring, pushing, helping develop, nurturing? And it goes back to that natural, innate ability humans have to be able to empathize with other human beings, that the human beings working in decentralized Amazon are much happier than the human beings working in the centralized Amazon. And although decentralized Amazon may be impossible, it's still worth advocating for and actually building towards. And that's a socialist ideology right there.
But I think you can build a better centralized Amazon. So, great example. Everyone's pissed off with YouTube at the moment. They're censoring the fuck out of people. Might even happen with this show. We're seeing people being deplatformed. Some are getting it back, some not. Brett Weinstein lost his channel. Pomp lost his for a day. Bitcoin Magazine the other day. There's that fear that you might lose that channel. Matt Odell's created Bitcoin TV.
Very good.
Yeah, in preparation for that. And you know what? That's centralized, but it's an opt-out, but it is centralized to an extent. It's run by that team that run Bitcoin TV, and I'm cool with that. I would be cool with somebody coming out and saying, I'm going to build centralized, not Amazon. And everybody can list their products. This is the way we operate. And maybe centralized, not Amazon, starts centralized and has a roadmap to become decentralized. And I don't know all the answers. I think some things are hard to build decentralized. And I don't mind an incentive structure for someone to build a better Amazon, an ethical Amazon. I ordered some things yesterday. It's funny as fuck. We're having this conversation. Look, I've just got a fucking text message from Amazon. Delivered your package. Because I'd order a bunch of things for my football clubs and balls and bibs and shit, and I just got it on Amazon because that's the way you do it. It's just easy. It's done. It comes the next day. But if not Amazon existed, and it's like, I want to see the comparison. You order on Amazon and you order on not Amazon. This is the delivery time of both. This is the cost. It might be like, oh, it's going to be another day and you're going to pay £2 more. But this is what the drivers are paid. These drivers are not under pressure. People aren't being sacked. I think that marginal increase in cost, I'm always going to be happy to pay that, not to service a basically scumbag slave system. Like,
let's think about the tooling. So, I didn't want to. So a big disclaimer on all of my sort of political views. They've got no association with any of the free and open source projects I work on. This is what's great about some of the projects which I'm working on, that we have very diverse political opinions, and some of them are completely the opposite side of the political spectrum to me, and we still get on great, and we still create great, cool software. Okay, so one of the things we became excited in LN Bits was payment splitting. So we had this.
Explain LN Bits to people so they know.
LN Bits is basically like a WordPress for your Lightning node. So if you've got a Lightning node, you want it to serve different purposes. If you're a content creator, you might want it to, you might want to be able to throw up a QR code on your YouTube video, for example, or whatever. So you have all these different extensions, and you can extend LN Bits in any direction you want to extend it in. If you're a merchant, then you can have like a point of sale or a product management or something, or some sort of front-facing shop. So you have all these different extensions. So if you think about what was successful about WordPress, it's a very simple blogging website development tool. You install it, and then you build it in the direction you want to build it in. And you can customize it. And LN Bits is essentially that. It's a Lightning Wallets account system which sits on top of your node, but you have all these extensions so you can develop in any which way you want. So one of the extensions which was created by VHF was for Crypto Graffiti. He did a set at the San Francisco
Love you, Crypto Graffiti.
Old Fed thing, I think it was the old Federal Reserve, a DJ set during the lockdown COVID stuff. One of the cool things about it, so he put an LN URL pay on the screen, so basically a static QR code. You can use Lightning to pay. Okay, now if you paid enough, you would then get as a receipt a download link for the song which he's playing. But one of the functions in the software, which actually VHF didn't and Crypto didn't immediately pick up on as being super cool, but people in the LN Bits chat really liked, is the fact that when you made a payment, 10% went to the DJ, 90% went to the producer. So at point of sale, the payment was split. So we all became excited about that. And now we've created like a dedicated split payments extension. So you can say, well, when money comes into this wallet, I want it to go X amount to go to this wallet, this wallet, this wallet. So then you think about how that could infect, a micro venture. Like, we're going to go sell coffee on the street, okay? I'm going to be working, making the coffees. You're going to be front of house, okay? We're going to have some of the people working there. They're going to be doing this, that. And then we decide how much of, at point of sale, like how much percentage do we each get? Who's working the hardest? Who's got the most responsibility? Maybe.
How do you figure out who's working the hardest?
Maybe I don't know.
You can have phones to track you how long you take to make a coffee.
But this is a very interesting question. So you have that, again, hypothetically utopian, right? You have that small scale production of coffee, right? Now you think, well, maybe if I buy a laptop in the shop at point of sale, then maybe X% could go to distribution, X% could go to sales, X% could go to manufacturing. And then when it hits those wallets, it could split again. And we could do this because we have microtransactions. This is one of the cool things about microtransactions. So the cleaner in the factory, on the factory floor, looks at their wallet and they're getting these sats just rolling in, right? Sometimes the sats start to slow down. They start to get less sats. And they're like, well, why is that? And there starts to be some discussion on the shop floor. Like, why am I getting less sats? Like, oh, it's because we just made the percentage smaller for sales because distribution, they needed more money for this, that, and another. And then the people in, on the shop floor are like, well, that's not real. Actually, we need more sales to be able to sell. And they're like, more. And there becomes this discussion. And this is kind of like when you talk about the failure of something like DAOs. People aren't incentivized to discuss and to actively engage and vote on decision making. Whereas if it actively affects the amount of sats they can see pouring into their wallet, I think that kind of changes. This is utopian sort of science fiction. Now, when it comes to tax collection, so Bitcoin makes tax collection infinitely harder. Okay, one of the best forms of tax collection, and it's also quite fair, I think, as well, is VAT, value-added tax. Rich people buy loads of stuff, so they pay more tax. If we've got payment splitting, and if we have ultimate privacy, of course, as users, and this is my utopia, and government, shrunken Bitcoin-dominated government has, we have ultimate transparency because we have their read keys and we have their public keys. We can see where all the money's going. When I pay for that coffee, okay, my 20% tax or my 10% tax can go directly at point of sale to government. Okay, so now that coffee shop doesn't have to worry about doing tax returns and stuff, right? Maybe you could extend that further. Maybe in my wallet, I can say, this is a very progressive, Bitcoin government, shrunken government now. Maybe I can say, well, I want, 50% to go to education, 40% to go to healthcare, 5% to go to my roads, 5% to go to military. And then at point of sale, I'm making a democratic decision. I'm saying, this is where I want my tax money to go. I'm spending this money. I'm investing this money in my government.
But is it voluntary, or you have to spend a certain amount?
You have to. So basically, if you're a government and you're trying to tax businesses, physical, real world, brick and mortar businesses, then, and this is in a Bitcoin world where people are using Lightning Network and Bitcoin, it's very easy to kind of like hide money. One of the best ways to tax people is to say, look, you got to have this point of sale, and at point of sale, tax has to come to us, the X% has to come to us. This is the medium term, okay? This is far away from our robot utopia, okay, or whatever. So what I'm saying is that when you have different tooling, like we have payment splitting, microtransactions, payment splitting, then different ways of money flowing through the system. We don't need the money managers, which you would have. So now when you're talking about how centralized feudal Amazon will always outcompete decentralized Amazon. Centralized feudal Amazon, like part of their power is just like state. Part of their power is in the money management. Right? If you could take away the money management, and then if you can somehow use this new tooling, and it's that thing where, because you're breaking new ground and you're working with tools which haven't existed before, you've got to think of use cases for them which aren't immediately apparent. Right? So. Which is very hard to do, and it becomes obvious as when you look back, with retrospect. After 6 months later, you think, oh yeah, of course, well, why wouldn't we have payment splitting and then someone in the kitchen receiving the sats directly when a point of sale is made with the coffee? But it kind of takes a while to experiment with this technology and with this tooling. But I do think that the technology and the tooling we're building is going to build fairer forms of production, like that, for example. It's going to work towards the decentralized Amazon thing. So when you were talking before as well, so I don't want to talk too much about the projects which I'm involved in because I don't want to associate my ridiculous political ideology with that.
Yeah, but like people listening who do that need to shut the fuck up. Yeah, like you just need to shut the fuck up and allow everyone to talk and be heard. Because if you don't, sorry, I just have a rant here. Is that if we scare people off from having even opinions or having conversations, we're rebuilding the shit that we don't like. And that's one of the things that really fucking pisses me off, like about some of these morons on Twitter who literally dogpile in and shout people down to the point they're scared to actually say what they want to think. They're creating a new form of self-censorship where people are like, I don't want to share my opinions, I get shouted at, and then the marketplace for ideas is being destroyed. Yeah, so I'm just going to rant. If anyone fucking goes at the work that Ben's being done or his colleagues, because Ben's ideas, you're a fucking idiot. You need to shut the fuck up. Sorry, rant over.
Yeah, I feel like my big brother just waded in and
no,
told
but it just does my head in, because what we're doing is we're killing the conversation.
Well, this is an important point. So this is the difference between rhetoric and dialectic. Okay, so the dialectic is thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Right. So how do you come up with better ideas? Well, you have your ideas challenged, and then you incorporate. Like when you were younger and you were like, yeah, I'm a full lefty, and then you had your ideas challenged and you sort of started to realize that actually, the capitalism stuff, it's not all evil like it's made out to be. And actually, if you have better free markets, then maybe it's not as bad. And then you change your opinion and you lean in a different way. And then quite often with people with extreme viewpoints on either side of the spectrum, it's rhetoric. They shout opinions, and then if anyone challenges those opinions, then they like you say, they go after them, they mute them, they block them, whatever. Bitcoin, I mean, like you say, like a lot of these conversations, so originally because I saw in 2016, 17, I think it was probably around then, that there was this real co-option and this real idea that Bitcoin was exclusively for an ANCAP, Austrian economics, whatever. And I thought, hold on, that doesn't make any sense. I don't think that way. I don't believe in those things. I mean, I see value in them, but I'm much more left-leaning, socialist anarchist, sort of socialist libertarian type. I changed my handle on Twitter to the Bitcoin Socialist, and that really. And I was there for years, man, and I was flying that lefty flag, and people blocked and muted me to hell. But I had lots of people when I went to real world events, conferences and things. I mean, even people with I would say that people actually working on stuff in Bitcoin, like actually developing things, a lot of them are very apolitical and pragmatic like yourself and believe that the world's nuanced and complicated, right? Mm-hmm. But I would also have a lot of people who would come up to me and say, oh, I'm so glad you kind of waved the flag because, I agree with you. And I do think it's these free and open source software. It's copyleft. It's, decentralized decision-making. It's blah, blah, blah. And we have all these conversations and like people start to admit that actually, and now there are some good Telegram groups, people now being more outspoken. And I think it's in direct response to this kind of like co-option and this idea of rhetoric of just saying, this is Bitcoin, this is how it works. And this is, what sort of society it will build. It'll be citadels and it'll be, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, hold on, will it be all that stuff?
Well, this is why I feel a sense of responsibility to when people were saying, Pete, you need to get some more left-leaning people on the show. And people, you were tagged and get Ben in, talk to Ben. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I mean, the incentive structure for running a podcast is
don't piss off your audience.
No, our audience. No, it's audience capture. Yeah. Okay, if you have an audience, capture it. Speak in their language. Grow your downloads. Create your loyalty, and then advertise your downloads to your sponsors, and your sponsors will spend more money. Okay, that's the incentive structure. But I talk about this with Danny, my producer. It's a shame he's not here. I wish we could have met him, but we talk about this a lot. And we always say, I was literally on the phone to him on the way down and said, we are never, ever not going to make a show because we're worried about what the audience thinks. We always want to be known as a show that will talk to anyone. And we had it recently, right? Go back a few weeks. I did this on purpose. In the same week, I think it was maybe in consecutive shows, I had Laura Loomer, who I think her ideas are fucking mad. And I fundamentally disagree with her. I think she's antagonistic. I think she discriminates against people. I think she has siloed her own opinions. And I fundamentally disagree with her. I told her, I said, I disagree with your ideas. And I got a whole bunch of people like on YouTube complaining about having her on. Other people saying, well done having her on. And other people saying, you're an idiot. The next show, I think it was the next show, I had Anita Bosch on. Yeah, and we had Anita's very much on the left. And we had a conversation which was about the financial patriarchy. And the title alone was triggering people like, what's this fucking bullshit? What are you on about? It's like, there is a financial patriarchy.
Yeah, there is,
like
absolutely.
If you're in complete fucking...
White men control. It still exists.
Yeah, it does. And in certain parts of society, in certain countries, there's absolutely a patriarchy that controls and oppresses women. And that does come through money. To deny that is, it's fucking ludicrous. But what I'm saying is, in that week, I've had polar extremes on the show because you can listen to people and get ideas. And that's what we should have. So I'm always going to have... I want to talk to the people want me not to talk to. That's actually what I want to do because I want to learn from everybody. And I think if we can all listen to each other, we can take things forward. We can... I'm not a socialist. I like the NHS, and I think I can learn from you. Well, I'm going to learn from you because your recall of history is incredible. And I can learn from everyone, and that's what we should do. Not this fucking yelling and giving each other shit, because actually it becomes very authoritarian.
It's much more comfortable if you think that you have the answers to society and to the world, the material world, and that you're on the right side of history. It's much harder to question your own cultural hegemony and to think, well, am I on the right side of history? Am I doing the right things? Could things be better? Can things improve? That's more difficult and harder to do. It's much easier to be just sort of black and white, okay, binary. And this is what you get a lot of within, I don't know, I mean, maybe all this stuff
circles, it's not just Bitcoin.
All circles, but maybe a lot of this stuff is surveillance capitalism, maybe the incentive structures and things like Twitter and Facebook and things, maybe they propagate this way of thinking.
They certainly do.
They certainly do.
Algorithms have fucked.
Yeah, humans.
Algorithms have fucked the people who refuse to step back and realize that algorithms has fucked them.
Yeah.
Like once you recognize the algorithms are fucking you, like you can step back. You can step back. And one of the most important things I think some people can do is question themselves, could I be wrong?
Yeah.
I do all the time.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I came out with the most ridiculous statements sometimes. I came out one at the start of the pandemic. I was like, yeah, we should lock down everyone. And I realized I was wrong.
Did you ever see that Mitchell and Webb sketch where they're dressed as Nazis?
No.
And then David Mitchell, he's like stood there and he's sort of looking quizzically in the air, and he turns around to Robert Webb and he says, "Are we the baddies?" And I think the whole sketch is these two Nazis. And then at one point they're like, well, we actually have skull and crossbones on our uniform, so we probably are the baddies.
Oh, fuck. I've got skull and crossbones on my football team.
Are you the baddies?
No, we're the goodies.
You're the goodies. But I mean, so going back to surveillance capitalism, going back to things we should all use like Twitter and Facebook, for example, has private capital failed there? Should it be done in a way which isn't in the hands of private capital? I think it probably should. So I don't know if you're aware, I'm going to give a big shout out now to an absolutely phenomenal project, which could solve a lot of these problems. And a lot of us Bitcoiners are incredibly excited about, even though it has nothing to do with Bitcoin. Apart from it uses Schnorr, public key crypto, which is pretty cool. It's NOSTR, so notes and other stuff relays. That's what it stands for, NOSTR. Right. So it's a very simple concept, which is that you have client software, and then you have these relays which just relay notes, which you send to the relay using WebSockets. The simple example I did was make a kind of Twitter platform. So you have a public key, private key. I have a public key, private key. I subscribe to your public key, you subscribe, and then anything you sign as a message and send up to one of these relays, I can then pull down because I'm subscribed to your public key, and I can verify that it's you who sent that message. So I made a very simple NOSTR Twitter client, okay? Fitch, I've very recently actually fully upgraded it. And if you go on, it's called, I've got it on nostr.com, but that's a fork of his new Twitter client. So actually go on his repo and check out the actual NOSTR client. The Twitter client he's made. But if you go on nostr.com, I was like Roger Ver, I bagged the protocol as a domain. If you go on nostr.com, you'll see there that you can do a lot of the stuff you can do on Twitter. And it's not that much more work which needs to go into it in order to make it a competing system with Twitter. And it's quite interesting as well because these relays can kind of serve different purposes. Like if you're like me and you want kind of quite a vanilla experience when you go on Twitter, I don't want to see anything gross and extreme, then I could subscribe to relays. I could connect to these relays which only have that type of content and do filter out horrible content. But if you want horrible stuff, so it depends on the relays, the relay, whoever's running the relay. But there are relays which people won't filter anything. So
relays would be reputation based.
And these relays, these relays are, that could be a separate relay on its own, just verifying reputation and stuff. But these the point is that they're really easy to spin up, and if you take a relay down, it's kind of inconsequential because you can just spin up another one, and people can just connect to that instead and start communicating over that relay. So, kind of the roots to this concept, and this is quite interesting, was when I first made LM Bits, I wanted to show that because we've got these extensions and they're quite easy to make on LM Bits. I wanted to show that you can make a proof of concept extension. So my proof of concept extension was something called Diagon Alley. Okay, so thinking about dark markets, I'm not a big fan of dark markets, but I do, I appreciate the sort of software challenge, as it were. And the problem with dark markets now is if a dark market gets taken out, it sucks for everybody involved. People lose their reputation, people lose their money, and then they have to go to another service and build up all their reputation and have to try and prove somehow that they're who they say they are. Mm-hmm. So I made this thing called Diagon Alley. And the concept of Diagon Alley was that you would have a market stall, and you'd have your products on your market stall. And then you can point those products at a kind of front-end indexer, which will just index the products. So for the user, you go to the indexer. It's like eBay or Amazon. You pick the products you want. All the communication is being relayed through to the client software, to the person who's actually got the market stall. And you're able to prove that you're you using a key. So you're signing, notes to say that these are your products and this is your reputation. Right? And you build up that reputation, you have all those products on which you've got listed. Then the indexer gets attacked, it gets taken down. It doesn't matter because that person who has that market stall, they control all the data. They can just point at a different front-end indexer. And this indexer is free and open source software. It's easy to spin up anywhere. It's like Pirate Bay, you can spin them up anywhere. So it becomes kind of censorship resistant in that Not because it's decentralized. I mean, it's just very easy to spin up and very easy to, it doesn't matter if it kind of gets taken out. Well, when I made that proof of concept extension, Diagon Alley, so the extension was literally just to list some products and then throw them at this indexer. No one really saw value in it, apart from Fiat Jaff, who got involved in the project very early on. And he kept saying, we need to make something of this, we need to make something of this. And I didn't really get around to it. And then he like extrapolated out just you using it for a marketplace thing. And he generalized it more into a whole protocol, which is like this NOSTR protocol.
Can you use it for not Amazon?
Yeah, you could use it for not Amazon. Yeah, absolutely. So we keep saying to each other, we keep saying we need to build Diagon Alley, we need to build Diagon Alley. But at the moment, everyone's very excited about the NOSTR Twitter thing because you can see that it works. And also you can do things like, so because you're using Schnorr signatures, this is also quite cool as well, because we're using Schnorr signatures, we're experimenting with all the libraries which have been written for Bitcoin, which haven't really been tested very well. And like so it's kind of cool to kind of have like somewhere which doesn't involve value really, where we can use those libraries and help improve those libraries. Yeah, so everyone's very excited about the NOSTR Twitter thing because when you use
Is it decentralized Twitter?
I mean, so I can have a client on my phone. I can access my messages. I can post a tweet. People who are following my public key. Although in the new update, it's not public. It's like a name. So Ben Ark. People who follow Ben Ark, they can pull down that tweet and they can verify that it's from me. But because we're using Schnorr signatures, you could use something like a hardware wallet. So if you think about Nike or something, or some big corporation, McDonald's, or I don't know, Donald Trump. Like if you think about or like a president or a corporation, it would be quite nice to have like multi-sig and then also have like a hardware wallet, which you have to like take the note off, sign it, multi-sig it, and then blast out into the world as something you've produced, rather than that control just being in somebody's hand, which could be corruptible. It's more secure as well. So we can do a whole bunch of make use of a whole bunch of Bitcoin things with it. Public key crypto, I mean, it's the answer to a lot of the world's problems. And I like the fact that Bitcoin gives a lot more exposure to people. And then hopefully NOSTR will do that as well. It will give people a lot more exposure. But so direct messaging, for example, on a NOSTR Twitter, we have direct messaging where we can create a shared key using public key crypto. And then we can encrypt a message and I can send it to you. And if you send it through the network, it's completely encrypted.
So
and you can read it.
It can be decentralized Twitter and Signal at the same time.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, it's not really decentralized as per se. I mean, it is.
Kind of is.
It kind of is. Yeah, it kind of is. It's very censorship resistant. But it can be a whole load of things. And again, it's like a new concept tool, very simple concept. Seems, common. Like why wasn't this made before? If you go on the NOSTR protocol, if you Google NOSTR protocol and then you look at the protocol repo, there's a good breakdown of things like Mastodon and things. And then there is a question like, why hasn't this been made before? And then it's like, well, we don't really know.
Yeah, well, it just hasn't.
It just works, but it's very simple and it works well.
The problem is network effects.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of Bitcoin or Twitter types when they stumble across it, they do go and make an account on the NOSTR Twitter thing, and then they start tweeting and they start DMing each other and they're experimenting with the software. And you have to download anything. You can run. This is the cool thing. You could run the client yourself if you wanted to locally, and verify all the code and everything, or you can just use somebody else's client online. It's basically all browser based, so you're not. There's only so much which can go wrong, really.
Where do you stand on moderation of things like this?
Well, this is a very interesting concept. So you think, well, how you don't want people being exposed, like you don't want your kids being exposed to horrible stuff, do you, basically?
Well, it's a bit more than that. So let's look at the anti-censorship products that exist out there. I checked out Gab. It's just fucking full of bullshit. You have your 4chan and then your 8chan, which to me has just created a generation of absolute fucking idiots who just fucking idiots. And I would never want my kids exposed to that. And that's my responsibility to stop them being exposed to that, and great, but I will do. But Twitter with zero moderation for me would be a problem. Twitter with its current levels of moderation is also a problem. I think things are being censored that shouldn't be. The
decisions are being made by a centralized authority which comes under the control of US government ultimately. And so they need to, second guess what US government would want them to say or would want them to say. And also,
but it's got worse ever since Trump. It's got worse.
Yeah. Also, as well, I mean, they're a very liberal part of the US, and they're kind of liberal people, young people working on it. So there's lots of things which will be said, which is maybe from the far right, and then they'll ban. And
not even the far right. I think that's
So in
just from the right.
in NOSTR Twitter, because you can connect to multiple relays. You just connect to the relays which you want to be exposed to. So like I said, there'll be some relays which don't censor content. There'll be some relays which do censor content. If there's a relay which you feel is censoring content in a way you don't like, just connect to a different relay,
But you need the network effect to build it up. So there's a better service there.
You'd be surprised. I mean, like in a Telegram group, for example, if you have like 10 people in a Telegram group, you have nice discussions, you check it daily, you can have a chat with people. Similar with NOSTR Twitter, say NOSTR Twitter, for example. If you've got 10 friends on there and you're connected to the same relay and you're dropping messages on there every day and chatting to each other, it's a useful tool.
But then is it really like an alternative to Telegram rather than Twitter? Because what I'm interested in is Twitter being better or a better Twitter.
Well, I mean, so Twitter have this thing called Blue Sky.
Yeah. Does Twitter have it, or is it separate from Twitter?
It's Jack. That's the point. Jack Dorsey has funded this thing called Blue Sky, which nothing has come out of.
No.
And they should really look at NOSTR.
Come on, Jack. If you're listening.
Exactly. They should really look at NOSTR and start making some commits, because I really think this is the best option for people. Check it out, and the audience can check it out and see what they think. But yeah, no, it's desperately needed in society, and you do need censorship. What's cool about this is you're kind of censoring yourself almost. You can build a whole range of things, by the way. So I did like a little paper on a decentralized Uber, which I remember Andreas and Censorship used to talk about. So you have different note kinds. So I said, well, we could have a note kind for your geographical location. So I go on this client software, I go on an app. I say I'm a customer, I want to get a taxi. So now I've got a public key and a private key. I can say, this is my location, I need a taxi. And then all the people who are sharing their location, all the taxi drivers, they just sign a note and say, this is my location. I can then go look at their reputation, which is attached to their keys. And you could have some verification service. So this is verified by, superverificationservice.com or whatever. So you could have some verification service to prove that who they are, and you could look through the reviews and see if they look like legitimate reviews or not. And then I could say, look, I need a taxi, and then the taxi driver might be like, oh, well, actually, you haven't got any reviews. Just set up this account, so I'm going to take a bit of a gamble, and I'll go and pick you up anyway. Pick you up, take you somewhere, pay however you want. It'd be cool if you paid on Bitcoin, Lightning Network or something. But you pay however you want, and then you both leave a review for each other, so you have reciprocal reviews. And I wrote a paper about how you could do that on, not paper, just like a repo thing, how you could do that on NOSTR very easily, actually. It'd be an easy thing to make. And it would work as well. Like you say, you kind of need the network effect for it to work. But it's anybody could be a taxi driver. So it's kind of the promise of Uber. Like I could get in my car and I could set up I'm a taxi driver now. And I could advertise and then probably charge people less because I haven't got any reputation, but then build up my reputation and then maybe charge more for because I've got really good reputation, thousands of reviews or whatever. Things like sock puppetry and Sybil attacks, they're kind of like something which needs to be worked out. But you could do that with verification services and verification relays. I actually thought about this, and it was I was thinking, what other services do people need to meet at in geographical location, and then also have like a rating review system?
Sex.
Yeah, man, you did it. It did the same thing for me. It popped into my head, and I said to my girlfriend, I said, look, right, I'm sorry, but I think this would be really good for prostitution. Like if you think about, because you've got client reputation and also prostitution reputation as well, it would be much safer because they could say, well, okay, you haven't got you haven't got any reputation, so I'm going to take a gamble on you, or I'm not going to take a gamble on you. So I think as a tool, because I called it Booba because it was Bitcoin Uber, but
Booba.
That was a Bitcoin Uber, but then it sort of made sense then. Maybe that's why I thought of the sex thing. I was like, well, because then I was trying to think of other services, and that was the one which really just stood out there. Actually, that could be a really useful tool for
sex workers.
Yeah, for sex work, absolutely.
Yeah,
and it could be make women safer as well, like by the reputation system which exists within it. There's a lot of things which need to be built on it. If you're interested, people, it's NOSTR_protocol on Telegram. And if you go to Google NOSTR protocol, have a little look at that. There's lots of good Bitcoiners involved in it. The Cooks and Rockstar Dev are involved in it, and Viet Jaff, and there's a whole load of great people working on it.
Well, I'll definitely check that out.
A lot of software which needs to be built to make it, work realistically. What's cool about it as well is it really has nothing to do with Bitcoin, because a lot of these solutions, they involve having to use Bitcoin in some way, like having to use a Lightning network to send censorship-resistant messages. And they're all kind of cool and interesting, but it shouldn't be like a prerequisite to censorship resistance for sending a message from one person to another, having to also have a Lightning node, which is like a big pain in the ass.
Well, this is the problem with shitcoins, is that, and the Web3 crap coming out of Chris Dixon, that everything needs a token, and not everything does need a token.
Everything does need a token.
I mean,
the public key crypto stuff solves a lot of problems, and you can just use that.
Yeah, I mean, look, that is super interesting. It's nice to see other projects like that don't require Bitcoin. I mean, it feels like a Bitcoin project.
It's all made by Bitcoiners, yeah.
Yeah, but also that kind of like those kind of ideas of getting away from centralized services is super cool, and like that's commendable. I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we should bring this full circle.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, then again, let me put in that disclaimer that I have, that project obviously has nothing to do with my ridiculous political views.
Hold on, but why say they're ridiculous? Because you're almost...
I'm being self-deprecating, just to kind of like fluff the far right audience members who are like, hey, you are ridiculous.
It's a difference of opinion.
Yeah. The dialectic, if you want. I mean, if discussion is very important, the world's nuanced and complicated. It's far more comfortable to exist in a world where you're on the right side of everything and it's black and white. This free market's good, like socialism bad, but actually we need some pragmatism and nuance in there. I can see all these amazing, wonderful things which exist in free markets. I love small to medium-sized enterprises. I think they're incredibly efficient, good for people. I don't like things like corporations. And then similarly, if you're on the other side, you could say, well, I can see that cooperatives, if you can build them and they work, that they're better for the workers who work in that working environment, producing that thing, and that's better than something like a big corporation. And corporation is a kind of bad form of capital, which we need to somehow move away from. How do you move away from it? Well, you could like regulate out of existence. Well, that kind of sucks because then you're empowering state more. Or do you create some better way of doing it within like the free market system, which can outcompete it in a free market kind of way? So yeah, no, absolutely. Like you need the dialectic. You need to reach synthesis by exchanging ideas.
There will be some negative comments coming in.
Yeah,
because you mentioned Marx.
I mean, this is the problem with Marx. So people read like the Communist Manifesto and they think, well, this is actually, again, like he basically did what I did. He praises capitalism, the first part of the Communist Manifesto, or its ability to string the world together with all these trade routes and produce or bring all these people out of poverty, blah, blah, blah. And then he says, however, it will result in this revolution, right? But then if you read Capital, Capital's about just private capital. I mean, it's actually the introduction to what was going to be a range of 6 books, but that's Capital. It's a very complicated economic analysis of capitalism. Not negative. It's just an analysis of capitalism using what he called historical materialism, which is so. It's as an economist, like this is another thing which frustrates me. Mises, he's a genius, absolutely. Hayek, genius. So is Keynes. These are the economists with 2 brains. Had some incredible ideas. Fought really hard to prevent another war, predicted the Second World War after the First World War and the reparations against the Germans. Genius. Marx, genius. Like great economic.
Can we talk about Marx for a second? Is the issue with Marx in that when you mention Karl Marx, then people jump to, well, Marxism has led to the deaths of 100 million people.
Exactly.
And obviously,
you've got that blood on your hands.
Yeah, you've got the blood on your hands. But actually, there's a difference between Marx being accurate in his observations and then the interpretation of Marxism by others as a way of organizing society, which are 2 different things.
It was that assumption that a revolution would happen in a kind of bloody way, which then brought people to try and push this revolution to happen. I mean, Marx said it would happen in the most advanced capitalist society would then transition to socialism, but it was pushed on. One of the poorest nations on earth, Russia, with the largely sort of agricultural feudalist society, it was pushed on them.
Well, this is this push and pull. It's like when I was at Santiago.
But yeah, Marx. If you were to look at any of that stuff, it would be an atrocity. He rolled in his grave over what happened, over his theories. Him and Engels had this concept called withering of state, which is very interesting. Withering of state. I'm glad I remembered to mention it just before the end here. And it's that when in a socialist society of exchange, that state will become superfluous and cease to exist. So the concept is that when you minimize state institutions and replace them with self-governing cooperative structures, that you will no longer need state. And I think that's basically what a lot of Bitcoiners want as well. We want to replace state with Bitcoin, and with some of the systems we can build on top of Bitcoin as well. There's a great quote by Saint-Simon as well, which was that soon the art of governing men will come to an end. It will be replaced by a new art, the art of administration, which is that when you're able to replace, and actually Nick Szabo, one of our own boys, he has this concept of social scalability, which is basically that you can use the tools which we're building to replace all these institutions which need to exist currently in order for society to work the way it works. But you can replace them with the tools we're building, and it will be a better, more freer society. And you can also use those same tools, like we said, within the private capital, within, like we're talking about payment splitting and things. Like you can replace a lot of the structures which exist just with just some software, basically. And it's so for those who say that Marx was a statist, go read Withering of State, Google it.
Your critics, did they misunderstand you or did they disagree with you?
I think a lot of it is if you have a binary viewpoint of the world, and then so basically if you ever have an amygdala response to something, you have to question whether that you're being rational, and whether you've just hit an opinion which is flying in the face of your material reality.
Are you shooting from the hip, or are you considering your response?
Yeah, or are you considering your response? Like if that amygdala kicks in, and I think quite often when you have like an extreme viewpoint, and this is either side of the spectrum, and then something challenges it, but then I think it kicks in that amygdala response. But I know, like you say, discussions, this how we improve, how people get more liberty eventually. The slow revolution.
Yeah, man. Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming down.
Thanks for having me, man.
I'm going to want to do a follow-up actually at some point, because there's a whole bunch of stuff we didn't get into that I want to dive into with you. And
we should do a separate software one, actually.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I don't add much value there because I've got no fucking idea what I'm talking about. And I'd rather listen to Stefan Livera interview you about software.
Oh no, I mean, I'm on a sort of like heady protocol level. I'm terrible. Like I'm more of a front end, this is cool, what we can do with this software, let's experiment with it kind of way. So,
but I think
with you on that.
I think if we'd have dived a little bit deeper, there were some other areas I might have disagreed with you on, but I'd like to have gone into them. There will be a range of responses from this. I can guarantee you now. Go and read the YouTube comments. They're going to be, yes, thank you for getting somebody on who I agree with, or yes, thank you for getting an alternative viewpoint on. And there's going to be like a fuck you and status cuck and socialist fuck, and like we just let them bounce off us. Nobody's harmed by us having this conversation.
What's that great quote by Proudhon? Property is theft, property is liberty. So this going back to basically what we're saying, that it's nuanced, it's complicated. Yes, property is great, but not all property is great, and it can be exploitative. Me owning another person is slavery. That's a bad form of property. Surveillance, capitalism is a bad form of property. It's nuanced, it's a spectrum. There's good private property, there's bad private property. There's good capital, there's bad capital, there's good this and that. Then we've got to find the least buggy, best part of that. Whatever we're looking at.
Well, listen, like I say, I appreciate you coming on.
We've got to end this.
You this. No, we don't. I mean, carry on. Is there anything we've not touched on you want to touch on?
No, it's good. It's fine.
Fine. I just feel like we've come full circle.
Yes.
I want to go and consider it, listen to responses, and think about when we can dive back in.
Can I? There's another quote actually, which I want to get in there, because I just think there's some great quote from the anarchist. So Proudhon was an anarchist. He's the first anarchist, by the way. Referred to himself as an anarchist, and that was the property is theft, property is liberty. There's another one by a guy called Murray Bookchin. If you're an ecologist, if you believe in humans should have a better relationship with the environment, and also you're anarchist leaning, Murray Bookchin's fantastic. Just go read him; it's brilliant. But he has a quote which is that technology increases potentiality for freedom, but bourgeois control over technology empowers their hierarchy and control over people, which is, if human beings, and it's having control over technology, it's a bit like the Hal Finney quote, isn't it? Of I realized that we could use these tools for liberation. That us having control over the technology is good for people, but then if it's controlled by state, 1984 style state, or if it's controlled by some big horrible corporation, surveillance capitalism, then that's bad. Murray Bookchin, he wrote that in the 70s. It's quite insightful.
I think we're gonna have a good set of show notes for this one. No, I appreciate you coming on, man. Like I say, look, it's I think being holding the views you have and coming to talk about them on my show is kind of a brave thing to do, because you know there's going to be a reaction. I don't agree with you on everything, but I really enjoy talking to you, and I'm going to want to do this again. It's fortunate that you're not too far away, so if I'm it's quite easy to organise a show in here in the UK, which I don't get to do as many as I'd like, which leads a lot of the conversation, because I think there's definitely a US bias to my guests, and therefore a US bias to the conversation. We are very different in Europe from America. We are naturally a little bit more socialist, and I don't think that's been entirely bad.
No, I mean, you can look at, if you look, I'm always fascinated with the Bitcoin conferences. When you go to Bitcoin conferences, you go to a European one, there's a heavy emphasis on the free and open source side of Bitcoin. And then when you go to kind of a US one, it's much more about kind of the business sector of Bitcoin, and there's less free and open source projects there. And I just kind of think there's two kind of different approaches. Like, and like say if you look at the node map, for example, most of the nodes in the world are in Germany. And there, a lot of the German hackers, they're sort of anarchist left types, you know. So yeah, no, there are kind of two different approaches and ways of thinking about Bitcoin, and neither of them are, you know, both of them have good points, and they should, you know, engage each other. And I'm actually seeing more and more. So I know in Miami now for the new Bitcoin conference, they're going to have this absolutely ginormous, which Matt Odell's helping organize. So big, you know, shout out for him for doing it. But they're going to have this huge hack space now, encouraging free and open and giving free tickets as well away to free and open source projects. Nice. So it's great to see kind of the US conferences now. Because I mean, back in 2019, the hack space was me putting two tables together and saying this is the hack space, because it didn't exist. And now it's like a full like auditorium. So you know, credit where credit's due. They are starting to encourage all this free and open source kind of thinking, rather than just thinking about Bitcoin as business, you know.
Awesome, man.
Anyway, yeah, let's end it.
Thank you very much. No, dude, where do people find you?
So you can, if you go Ben Arc on Twitter, and then I think Arc BTC on GitHub, or it's Ben Arc. That's got all my projects on. I make a lot of hardware projects like points of sale, vending machines, arcade machines, and then also work on Allen Bits as well, which kind of came out of the hardware projects. But that's kind of quite a popular piece of software right now, and it's very exciting to work on. Still beta. And then also the NOSTR stuff, when I get a chance. I always feel really bad because we've got some incredibly productive people in the community who constantly pump out software and code, but I'm not nearly contributing as much as I should be. But yeah, so Google those things, Allen Bits, NOSTR, and then also, I've got like a series of hardware tutorials, BTC IoT. If you Google that, it's on World Crypto Network on the YouTube channel, and you'll see the
World Crypto Network. Is that Vortex? World Crypto Network. Is that Vortex?
It was, but then he forked to like the Bitcoin Network Crypto or something. It's a very similar sounding name.
I love Vortex. He messaged me the other day.
He had great branding on his channel, and then he stopped making videos, and I was quite sad actually.
He's such a great guy. I mean, I just think he did his tour of duty in Bitcoin and wanted to move on to other things. But he messaged me the other day. I'm speaking to him ages. I want to see him again. I think he's such a fucking great guy.
Such an eloquent speaker too, isn't he?
Just a nice, good person. Like a really good human. So.
Yeah. I'm good to see if he gets back into the fray.
I'd love him to. Well, listen, look, thanks for coming on. We'll share all of that in the show notes. Stay in touch. If you ever got something you want to come and talk about, please do come back to me. You got my details. You got Danny's, and good luck, man, and take care.
Good luck with the football club. I look forward to seeing how you do this sort of future sci-fi tokenization.
Yeah, let's see how that plays out. I'll be putting that out to consultation and see what people think. Just get their opinions, and I expect there will be a range of opinions. But let's see what we can do there.
Yeah, it's exciting, breaking new ground. Well done.
Yeah, peace out, man.
Cheers.